So hopefully some of you have been able to participate in the daily activities, the daily meditations, and engage with the practices that have been suggested. So each Wednesday now we'll work a little bit out of the text, and then we'll use that during the week and really engage with these Four Noble Truths, put these things that we learn into practice in our everyday life and see what we learn about ourselves and engage in this path in a way that has a conscious application rather than just a philosophical conversation. So I wanted to check in first and see what anyone may have observed from their week. Last week we focused on really noticing attachment as it arises, noticing the suffering of change we'd work through. Things that I think will bring me happiness, and there's now an attachment, then there's a suffering. We had some opportunities the last couple of days to notice when difficulties arise, and the idea that, I'm going to deal with these for the benefit of others so they don't have to. I'm going to take this on. We worked with the application of a, optimistic, hopeful attitude towards the troubles that come our way. So quite a bit that we've had through our practices. So I wanted to check in and see if anyone had any insights, anything to share from this week of recognizing the nature of suffering, how it impacts us in real time. So if anyone would like to, you could just raise your hand and I'll connect you through. Somebody's got a hand up. Let me see who it is here. Oh, Michelle. Okay, let me get you set up. All right, Michelle.
Hi there.
Hey.
So I had an opportunity for practice arise when both of my senior parents had taken falls in the last month during this time of quarantine.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. So I had to have a difficult conversation with my sister, who I don't really communicate well with. But having these practices in mind just really made me focus on coming at it from like a compassionate point of view and preparedness. And because there wasn't like an emergency with somebody in the hospital or something, it was an opportunity to, instead of practicing avoidance, which would be typical in my family, to just gently, bring the topic up and have a discussion and kind of put it out there. So that was really helpful to me, just to be thinking of that, because I probably would not have addressed it with my sister if I hadn't been thinking of taking on difficult things and working with them gently.
Wow. I hope they're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what a wonderful observation when we think about preparing for difficult situations. The idea that, hey, if something comes my way, I'm going to, come at it from a perspective of optimism, of hope, and a willingness to tackle it. And I think what you're sharing to me strikes me as a value I have in my life of taking some time to recognize what I'm putting in my mind instead of just waking up and being on autopilot and things happen and I react. The idea of having a practice in the morning of, remembering these four thoughts in this rare and precious life, and then preparing my mind and remembering, why I am here and when opportunities arise. So for me, I found, which I'm relating to what you shared, is that by doing that practice in the morning and by bearing this in mind, I find that there's a lot more opportunity for me to respond in a more meaningful way, which is what you're sharing. I think that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. We got Carla. I'm going to bring you in, Carla. And there you go.
All right. Going back to some of the instructions on May 7th and May 8th about bringing awareness into activities, seeing if we can make meaningless activities meaningful.
Yeah.
I think particularly now that we're a little bit more isolated from each other, I feel like I'm spending a lot of time on just sort of little chores around the house, and they're not particularly harmful, but making them meaningful seems to be a little bit of a stretch. Can you maybe define what meaningful is, and maybe elaborate a little bit more on how to make some of these activities meaningful, like balancing the checkbook and cleaning the toilet?
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. Such a great question. Especially now, right? We're not interacting as much, so we're doing sometimes some mundane things, and so mundane things can become spiritual things. And first off, I've noticed, and I was talking to someone earlier today, and one of the things he's done, with more isolation is he just made a point to reach out to some people. So he's called some people he hadn't talked to in a while, and he's made a point to kind of journal a little bit. And so what he's done is he's added some activities that he finds meaningful into his daily life, and I think that's one thing right off the bat. But washing the dishes, right? Checkbook. It's about my motivation. And my whole practice can be a spiritual journey in developing this path of awakening. Jetsuma Tenzin puts this so nicely. It's the practice of being aware of what I'm doing. So, we meditate, right? Practice meditation. My mind can, be scattered and I come back, scattered and I come back. And then, so we sit through a meditation, and then, meditation's over, mind's back, and we're like, okay, what do I got to do now? And everything I do can be training my mind. So doing the dishes, being aware of the water, being aware of what I'm doing, being present with that. I'm training my mind to be present. And so that doesn't even need to be me on a cushion. I can be doing the dishes and actually notice that my mind wants to listen to music, wants to get the news, wants to, do this or that. And I can notice all that and go, I'm doing my practice and I'm washing the dishes. And so there's an application that's really incredibly powerful, trying to maintain a continuity of consciousness. Says that we're, the latest studies show that we're aware of what we're doing about half the time that we're awake. And so if we can increase that just a bit more, then I'm also going to have some opportunities to really transform my life in really meaningful ways. So I'm off the cushion and I'm mindful and I'm paying attention. Motivation, though, okay. I mean, what about, the incredible gift that I actually have dishes to wash, and that it's with these dishes that I get to eat. And when I eat, I get to nourish this body and this food that I get to eat. How many people are involved so that I can have this food, this nourishment. And as I take in this nourishment, can I take this nourishment in so I can be healthy and well and be of benefit to others? And so one of the most transformative talks in my whole life, where I guess he brainwashed me, was how he explained that every single thing you do, including going to the bathroom, I could be having the thought, may this be beneficial to others. And he gave this beautiful talk. It was many years ago. It's what inspired me to go and get involved in my local Dharma center and eventually lead me to a monastic life. but it's my motivation of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So something like the checkbook, even if I'm writing a check, I could be paying a bill, or I could be hoping this helps our local economy. I can hope that, this helps our community. When I'm taking good care of myself, I'm doing this in a way that I can be helpful to others. He even had like going to the bathroom, may this help that little healthy bacteria that needs help. And so there is a practice where literally everything I do, I can be doing it in a way that's beneficial, whether I'm in the garden and other, the myriad of others and animals and so forth that we're helping to contribute to. So there's quite a bit that we could get very engaged with when we go through what are called mundane activities by transforming my motivation and my awareness to them. And then fundamentally, I don't want to waste this life. So in order for me to use my body well, I need to be healthy and well. Paying bills is significant. That I can have a sustainable life, so I can engage in this life, so I can be a benefit to others. I often give the example, even when I, things about when we pay a bill, if it's to someone, may this help them. So there's a few ways that we could transform doing stuff into really spiritual practice that can transform our lives. So that's a few examples.
Thanks. That was really helpful.
Good grief. Anyone else here? Good for the moment. Yeah, those are great questions. Gotta figure out how to put the hand down. Lower hand, there we go. I'm getting this techie stuff now. Okay. So, step one, right, Four Noble Truths, is to have an awareness of suffering, of the nature of dissatisfaction and the difficulties that arise in my life. And one of them, could easily just be that my mind's discontent and I can sit down to do something, my mind just wants to do something else. Or, how much ease and contentment do I have in my life, and noticing when that shifts. And then, of course, there's all the other events that come up. But often we're oblivious to it. And so this week, hopefully, we were able to notice, afflictive emotions, stress, worry, arise, and even irritation, minor things. And then the inspiration there was to, notice if attachment's caught up in that. How's attachment caught up? And can I let go of the attachment and actually just enjoy something? Or let go of the attachment and not fear something? And we may find that that's more difficult than we imagine. So that's where karma, klesha, conditioning, this is that conditioned, pervasive nature of suffering. We had suffering of change, which is what we've been working on. And then we get into suffering that's more pervasive. It's our conditioning. It's our habits and our tendencies are so well entrenched. And so, I used to frequently talk about, and I think everybody knows what they can do to improve their life. But then, can we do it? That's a different question. We can all eat healthier. We can do all kinds of things that we know. We can all make a list right now based on who we are, what we could do to improve our life. And then we could just not do it. We can even try to do it, not be successful. And what we're going to find is there's a lot of habits, a lot of conditioning involved there. Pretty well entrenched. And so noticing this, we could start to feel like we're a prisoner. And then people say things like, I can't change. Which is interesting because we're changing all the time. So the thought, I can't change. that really doesn't hold up. We're changing moment to moment. I'm not the same person today as I was yesterday or before. And so the interesting thing with change is that we are changing. And the question is, am I changing consciously in a way that supports this life that I would like to live? Or am I changing unconsciously on autopilot out of habit? So even my habits that I think I can't change, they are changing. They're getting stronger. They're not changing. They're just getting stronger. So they're getting more entrenched. So they're not staying stagnant. So this understanding around change and around conditioning, this idea I can't change. Yeah, we can't change. We are changing. And now with practice, it's just like when I talked about this idea of being mindful of what I'm doing, I can start to, if I can develop that in my activities, and those mundane activities are just, I'll tell you what, you want a meditation practice, try to pay attention to what you're doing throughout the day. That's going to change your life. Whatever it is, be with what you're doing. Well, now I can have a shot at being more conscious of the choices I'm making and the habits I'm creating and the thoughts that I'm cultivating and the conditioning. And I can be a participant in shaping my future instead of just autopilot. So that conditioning, that karma, that klesha, the samsara that we're experiencing, well, we can start cleaning the windshield of karma. We can start cultivating better karma. We can start being more mindful, make healthier choices and more meaningful choices. And we can start cleansing that windshield, and we can see more clearly. And we can do this all consciously. It takes time and a nice steady effort. That's why I'm so delighted that we get to work with the practice and come together here on Wednesdays and so forth. But if we don't notice any of that, one day is just another day, and then there's another day. And then the mind will say something like, I'll get to that tomorrow. Except tomorrow comes and goes and I don't do it. And there's habits and conditioning that are blocking me. So each day, this real valuable practice of bringing to mind, we have a rare and precious life. I don't know how many days I have. Right now, as a path of awakening, let me work on cultivating some of these qualities. And it's an idea of just doing a little more, I was talking to someone Monday, and, he's just saying, in his current situation with a spouse who's, has maybe a more consciously limited time to live. And even though we all have limited time, and, he's saying, yeah, I should be, present and savoring every moment. And so here's this thing, I should be in every moment. But I talked to him and said, well, how about we're just more present in more moments. We can do a little better. And this is the journey of the path here, is to begin in a path, not I'm on the path. I can work a little more at being more thoughtful about what I'm doing. I can work a little more about having a warrior practice. I can be a little more mindful than I used to be. I can be a little more understanding than I used to be. I can, cultivate and shape these habits, because this is a slow, thoughtful, conscious effort. It's not, I got the directions, 180 degrees, I'm Mr. Conscious guy. And it just doesn't work like that. That's a real setup for failure. It's much more saying, wow, I understand. And this is why it was so important. So I need to understand what I'm up against. And I'm up against, this inertia of conditioning. And so to be successful, I just need to realize that and start shaping it, kind of molding it. I think of a big slab of marble, and we're going to, get the edges. We're going to shape. We're going to, work with what I've got. And then what's going to emerge over time is going to be something much more precious than just whacking at it real hard. But if we don't recognize the inertia, the conditioning that we're up against, we're not going to be that successful. So this first couple of weeks were really around noticing how these habits and tendencies and suffering to change, our attachments, getting to know ourselves a little bit. But also, in these last few days, as was illustrated with the questions, what I can do about it. I can adopt a different attitude. I can do things a little bit differently. And I can engage in some activities, make them more meaningful. I can have a healthier attitude towards something. I can develop some patience. So I can start to notice how I can do things differently. So really important. Okay. Well, let's tap into the second noble truth. I don't see any hands over here. So I'm on page 43. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little congested. I'm okay, no problem. I must be allergic to something. I was doing good. I got in here, my nose just filling up. So hopefully I can enunciate well. So 43, discovering how trouble starts and stops. Probably a good idea to know. Second noble truth, sources of suffering. So after we've identified the scope of suffering, right? Suffering of change, this pervasive suffering, this conditioning, these karmic glaciers. We need to discover its sources, which are twofold: afflictive or counterproductive emotions and contaminated karmas. Afflictive emotions. Since afflictive emotions contaminate karmas or actions, I will discuss them first. There's two classes of afflictive emotions. One that is better expressed and the other is better not expressed. And what he's talking about expressed is really like talking about it, expressing it, sharing it. There's some subtlety here. Some of this may go against the grain of some of our Western psychological minds. An example of the former, that which we would express, is a terrible fear from a past that becomes fixed in the mind. In this case, it's definitely beneficial to let your feelings out and discuss the incident. And so, just prelude here, he'll tell a bit of a story. But what we're talking about is there's some things in our past that touch us deeply, and they show up in our lives, and they need to be dealt with. There's a lot of like trauma. They talk about adverse childhood experiences, things of that nature, that sometimes will show up and prevent us from being able to be intimate with people, or have healthy relationships with others, or prevent us, being fearful in some ways. So there's a percentage of afflictive emotions that may be in our consciousness from some of these early experiences, and that unless we kind of let them out and deal with them, they're just going to be kind of in our way for our lifetime. And so that's where he starts with. He tells a little story about himself. It's when I was around 14 years old during the summer at Normalinka Palace, the regent, who at that time was my senior tutor, scolded me after a teaching that he gave annually with harsh demeanor. He said, even if your realization is equal to a God's, your behavior still has to conform to a human being's. So he's lecturing. I was hurt because I felt that I was already acting as an ordinary student listening to him, even though I was the Dalai Lama ranking above him. I was irritated and remained uncomfortable for the next few months. So, this impacted him. It stuck with him. Then the Chinese communists invaded eastern Tibet, 1950, and I had to escape from Lhasa to Tromo in the southwestern Tibet near the Indian border. In time, the officials in Lhasa advised me that the situation looked workable and I should return. While on my way back to Lhasa, we spent several days at that regent's monastery. One day, he asked during a casual chat whether, because of his attitude, I'd ever become upset. I mentioned what had happened somewhat vaguely, without much detail, and what a relief it was. We went on to have a pleasant stay at the monastery. It's better to talk about such things that occur only once. Whereas so he's making a point that in this situation, it was something that had lingered, it bothered, it had festered, and he got it out. And so there's a group of these afflictive emotional states that arise that he's saying, oh, we should deal with those. And I just, share, there's just a whole wide range of them that we don't really need to talk that much about. We don't need to give them energy. They're afflictive emotions. They come and they go, and they strengthen. The more we talk about them, the more we give them power. Whereas the other class of counterproductive emotions, which include such feelings as lust, hatred, enmity, jealousy, and belligerence, should not be expressed. They become more and more frequent. Expressing them tends to make them stronger and more prevalent. It's better to reflect on the disadvantages of engaging in such emotions and try to displace them with feelings of satisfaction and love. We should forcefully overcome negative emotions when they appear, but it would be even better to find ways to prevent them in the first place. So let's touch on that for a moment, because what's that mean? What's the context? I get angry, I don't express my anger. And there's this whole genre of psychology. I remember, back when I was first in counseling stuff, they used to have these punching bags with these big soft bats. You beat this thing, you get angry, you get people all worked up, you talk about all this stuff. And then people, I've got anger issues or whatever that is. And His Holiness is saying, for a lot of these, that's not the right approach. I keep, then I identify as an angry person. And then what I'm doing is I'm creating more anger in my life. And so the example that I like to use is that if I get angry at someone, people talk about justifying anger, which I don't know how far I'll go down that hole, but somebody does something harmful to me. Somebody, cheats me on a deal or, sells me something, whatever. But they take advantage of me or they hurt me in some way. And I'm unhappy and I'm angry. So I'm angry, and then what do I do is I kind of stew in the anger, right? And then I call my friends and I tell my friends what happened. What happened, so and so. They're, oh, that's terrible. And now I'm angry and they're angry, and then they're all validating my anger and that person's such a jerk and whatever. So now I feel better, right? I feel better. I got it out. I shared, my friends, we all got on a self-righteous tirade. But what happened, right? Did I alleviate my anger, or did I just create the cause for more anger in my life? So, because now I'm valid in having anger around that. And so anytime I'm in a situation like that or anything similar like that, anger is going to rise much more quickly, right? Because of course, that's what you do. I've got validation. And so I keep creating scenarios that validate my anger, my frustration, my sadness, whatever it is. And so in the guise of releasing it, I'm actually validating it. And then I have much more of these afflictive emotions. So I'm not talking about it with a person in a problem-solving way, understanding, my anger as it's arising and what's my role in this, and the way my expectations might have been involved, or what kind of done different, or any of that, or even want to go rectify a situation with compassion, and clarity and equanimity, in which case now it's a Dharma practice. So they choose me, well, I'm going to go address them. I'm going to try to find out what happened, and I'm going to see what are the appropriate conditions to address this, without them being a bad person, another human being who has confused afflictive emotions, who's seeking happiness maybe in a way that's just, unhealthy, going to create a lot of problems in his life or her life. That's a whole different way of dealing with something. So in one way, I'm creating much more anger and resentment, or whatever the emotion is. In the other one, I'm kind of trying to solve the problem, and in a constructive, meaningful way, and in a way that doesn't create the conditions to amplify and create more seeds of anger, frustration, etc. So I'm going to pause there just to see if there's any thoughts or questions around that. So an example of this that is also like complaining. How often do we complain? And then if we complain, somebody else validates the complaints. And what I'm doing is I'm creating dissatisfaction. I'm not talking about what's right. I'm not talking about what incredible opportunities I have in my life. I'm complaining about something. And there's a big difference between complaining and constructive problem solving. Constructive problem solving is totally, healthy and beautiful. And here's something that needs to be fixed. Here's an issue I've noticed. Here's what we can do about it. Complaining, whining, things of that nature. Used to have a hat that said no sniveling. Somebody gave it to me when I was a monk. It was a maroon hat, no sniveling. It's pretty funny. But it doesn't mean to stuff feelings. None of this is saying stuff feelings. It's actually saying feel the feelings, but don't grow them, right? Feel anger, feel these things. They're going to come. But I want to, as we've addressed in the previous chapter, I want to now know that I am taking these on in a constructive way to eliminate difficulties in the future, to create a better future, to shape my future. So what's arising, which is harmful in some way or challenging in some way, is an opportunity now for me to respond in a way that's cultivated different karma, a different opportunity instead of seeds and imprints. And I can be now responding with compassion and awareness. And by the way, compassion doesn't mean I let the person take advantage of me. Out of compassion, I could be addressing what happened because I don't want them to engage in harmful karmic behavior, and it's not helpful, to allow things like that to go on. So I can very compassionately, with the desire to remove suffering, address, someone who's doing something harmful. I address their behavior with that motivation, and it's productive. So it's not, I'm not just, walk on me. That's not compassion. It's how do I engage with this situation productively in a way that cultivates this understanding of interdependence and and in a way that's going to allow me to have more peace and harmony in my mind and in my life, and the opportunity to continually cultivate my future in a meaningful way. So in other words, somebody doing me harm, justifying anger doesn't make a lot of sense. There's nothing you can do that would justify me ruining my future by growing seeds of anger and discontent in my mind. That, hurt me once, that's fine. But if I go with that anger, well, yeah, that's going to carry on for years. So I deserve to not, uh, take on that anger for many years. So there's nothing someone can do that justifies me ruining the rest of my life. Growing resentment, anger, that isn't even really not worth it. All right, we got 5 minutes. Let me see if I can get through this sort of paragraph here. So lust and hatred give rise to other counterproductive emotions and thereby create a whole lot of trouble in the world. 2 strong ones he's identified. We cannot be content to live with the consequences of lust and hatred. Of the 2, hatred is worse in the immediate basis because it so quickly brings harm to others. But lust is responsible for driving on the process of cyclic existence and repeated round of aging, of birth, aging, sickness, and death from lifetime to lifetime. So, and lust here isn't just sexual lust, it's desire, it's craving. Lust comes in so many forms. It's this driving force. And if we really look, how much of our life is driven by, craving or greed or desire, lust, including sexual lust. It's very prevalent. And sexual lust, just on its own, is just, it's pervasive suffering. Desire, lust, alcohol, addiction, gambling, food, wealth, desire for prestige and power, all of that. So it has just this massive reach. It shows up in many ways. The root of lust and hatred is ignorance of the true nature of all living beings, as well as ignorance of the nature of inanimate things. So it's misperception, right? I'm misperceiving myself and things. I'm confused. This ignorance is not just lack of knowledge, but a consciousness that imagines the exact opposite of the truth. So really delusional about how I'm experiencing the world, really misperceiving it. It apprehends what is actually, the exact opposite of truth. It misapprehends what is actually so. There are many levels of misperception, as in failing to understand what to adopt in practice and what to discard in daily behavior. But here, we are talking about the ignorance at the root of all suffering. This is the notion that sentient beings and other phenomena exist inherently in and of themselves. I will discuss this difficult topic later in chapters 8, 9, and 10. So we're going to unpack this nature, dependent arising, dependent origination, emptiness, this misperception that we see people and myself and things incorrectly and self-existent. That's at the core. That's what's going to give rise to everything. So we'll go more in depth in that. But the point that we're at here is to start to notice how habitually resentment, anger, complaints, things of this nature, I engage in those, and I don't recognize that they're actually dragging me down. Sometimes I even feel good. I get validation. There are some afflictive emotions that are deep rooted that we need to talk about, and maybe it's having an issue in a relationship, something we need to talk about, and And can we talk about those in a productive way? That's honoring, each other and the situation. Coming up at 7:30 already. So let me just pause there and see if anyone has any questions. Looks like we do have a hand up, Aaron. So, Aaron, you're on.
Thank you, John. I have a question about the section in the destructive emotions. And one could also experience, it seems one could also experience the emotion of happiness per se, and have it be an extremely afflictive state. In an example, if I swindle somebody and I feel good about it and I'm happy, it's an emotion that is not, wouldn't be in that list of destructive emotions, but in that instance, it would be very afflictive and destructive. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit and see where I'm not seeing the clarity.
No. I mean, he was addressing, some examples, but afflictive emotions, things that take you out of balance. So, I'm here, I'm peaceful, I'm content, I'm serene, but off onto either side, whether it's happy or angry, can be very afflictive. And it doesn't even have to be the analogy that you used, where I'm doing something harmful and feeling good about it. What's driving that, as he says here, is going to be greed or lust and misperception that's going to give rise to those. So I'm feeling good, I'm not feeling angry. But the afflictive emotion itself is arising. So it's taking me out of good behavior, which is where I think you're going with that. But more afflictive, I think, when we're talking about the emotion, not the deed, just the emotion, is I can be pretty addictive to wanting to feel really good, right? So there's a whole world of addiction out there. There's a whole world of addiction. And the afflictive emotion is, is this again coming from craving and so forth. But feeling good. So feeling so good, feeling, just blissfully disconnected and good. And so that can be very afflictive, just the emotion itself. And then that can be talked about a lot. We need to get to feel like this. And then feeling anything less than that is not okay. It's not even interesting. So getting back to Western psychology of the brain circuitry and reward system within the brain, is what happens is the equilibrium of feeling good changes. And so if I use a substance and I get that big endorphin hit, and then my brain chemistry changes, and I want to feel like this, and then doing this drug makes me feel like this. Well, what's not interesting anymore is my family. What's not interesting is, sharing, playing cards with my family in the evening or anything of that nature. That's not even remotely interesting, and that falls away. And I will give up everything to feel like this. So that's another way that, a pleasant afflictive emotion can really wreak havoc. Whereas, just the simple, just feeling good isn't necessarily a bad thing. What you tied it to was, a behavior, which is tied to that's how I feel good. And so again, but hooked to that is going to be some lust or desire around prestige or having things. And that's why I'm going to take advantage of people. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I usually have a deeper thought there that maybe I hit, but so none of this is isolated. No, there's always an interplay between what I think and how it links and how I feel and the behaviors and the conditioning. And And then the other piece to the destructive or harmful emotions isn't that the emotion needs to be destructive or harmful on its own, right? So there's another piece to that. And I can be frustrated, but it doesn't have to be a destructive thing. I could be sad or whatever, happy. Those can come and go. It's the way I engage with that afflictive emotion, and to what degree it takes me away from my ability of stability, of balance, you'll notice that we're much more able to make healthier choices in a balanced state of mind. When I'm not all the way off on bliss or way off into anger, really hard to make healthy, meaningful choices. But when I'm calm and I'm reflective and I journaling or do a little meditation, much more able to engage in life more fully and have a more connected sense of joy and well-being, and even resiliency as difficulties arise. I don't get thrown too far out of that center state. And that's where afflictive is. It's going to, by definition here with the Buddhism, it's afflictive in that it's taken me out of my well-being. It's taken me out of my peacefulness. It's taken me out of that zone where I can be more clear. Because much of the time, I can be much more in that middle zone and not be pegged off on either side. And it can go either way. And the behaviors to seek happiness, to avoid suffering. Therein lies the start of a lot of problems. Okay. All right, well, we went a little bit over as usual. So we'll have practice again tomorrow morning, and in this practice, not sure what I'm going to have you do yet. I'm going to think about it after the talk tonight, and I'll record a practice, but it'll be working with how this trouble starts and noticing something about, so he's been talking about these expressed and the ones that are not expressed, but also he tapped into our confusion, right? The core root is our misperception. But a layer above that is what to adopt and what to let go of. So what he's referencing there is what are virtuous activities, what are non-virtuous activities, what's to the behaviors and attitudes to adopt that are constructive, and what are the ones that are destructive. So how do we avoid the 10 non-virtuous actions? How do we engage in the 10 virtuous activities? How do we cultivate a greater ability to be present and healthy and in ways that align more with reality? So I'm going to reflect on how to work through this a little bit, and we'll have a little reflection tomorrow morning on what we want to pay attention to. Okay. All right. Well, I hope you found this meaningful. I'm very grateful we get to share the Dharma together. So let's take a little time to dedicate the merit and the wisdom we've accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes. Let us dedicate the merit and wisdom that we have accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes. May we dedicate this for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and find their liberation. May we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated here today throughout our lifetimes and be able to put it into action to purify our own minds, to help us recognize our own Buddha nature, that we may be able to truly benefit all sentient beings. May we also dedicate the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes for the long life of all spiritual teachers of all spiritual traditions who are authentically teaching the path of no more suffering. May they live long, may their teachings flourish, and may we especially dedicate for the long life of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. May he live long. May these teachings flourish.